Weekly Roll Up, where we cover the latest in legalization topics and cannabis news headlines. As of January 2022, the Leafly Jobs Report showed 428,059 full-time equivalent jobs supported by legal cannabis. A Wells Fargo analyst spoke out this past week about why there is a national shortage of truckers, the federal mandate for cannabis testing of truck drivers. And in Kentucky, new cannabis legalization bills collectively titled LETTS Grow, which stands for Legalize, Expunge, Treat, and Tax, have been filed. And now, here are your hosts, John Bond and Jared Duggins.
Hey there. It looks like it's just me on video right now. I'm not sure if we have John on audio, but unless he's going to ring in at the moment, I'm going to go ahead and start this on solo. So happy Friday to everybody out there. Welcome to the weekly roll up. Yeah, well, we're starting this one off with some technical difficulties. My audio wasn't working a second ago, but now it is. So yeah, thanks for bearing with us. Looks like John was having technical difficulties with his video, so I don't believe he'll be joining us at the moment until he does. So hey, happy Friday, Donkey Limit. We're gonna be pulling this off just a little bit differently here. When it comes down to it, is yeah, hey, the show must go on, and we'll figure out the technical difficulties along the way. So hope everyone's having a great week thus far. Lots of stuff going on in the world, not just in the world of cannabis, but in the world in general. So yeah, I hope everyone made it through this week in a peaceful manner, and yeah, it's having a good end to the week. So yeah, when it boils down to it, we got some good stuff to talk about on national levels, and then we've got some interesting points to talk about when it comes down to legalization efforts and what it means for public safety and drivers, mainly truck drivers and that kind of stuff. So as you heard in the intro, Wells Fargo did a study about trucking, and we'll be getting to that too soon as well. But first up is Cannabis Jobs Report, and I know Leafly did a survey here, and basically it came back at a 33% increase in jobs in a single year, and it marks the 5th year in a row of annual jobs growth greater than 27%. There's 428,000 jobs plus, include direct cannabis jobs like cultivation and retail sales, what are often called plant touching jobs, as well as indirectly ancillary jobs that serve licensed company or depend on legal cannabis sales. So right now, our U.S. cannabis jobs are weighing in higher than quite a few other sectors, and I believe that's dentistry and fire trucks, but for some other reason it's not coming up in the notes. Let's see. Oregon consumers, Oregon consumers purchased 1.18 billion in cannabis total products in 2021, and Oregon's legal cannabis market supports 19,938 jobs, which is pretty darn big for a state of that size. I feel like we've got someone in the audio. You there, John?
I'm working on it, man. Working through some technical difficulties here, but I should be good. Give me 2 seconds.
Right. That's all good. Totally. It's all good. Well, we're hanging with. So actually, as you heard, I was just talking about Oregon. Yeah, I have to get back on that. I know there was some statistics as far as what other industries we're beating out in that topic, but it doesn't seem to be in our notes here. Oh, hey, there he is.
Back live in the full effect, man. Apologies there. All good.
Happy Friday.
Absolutely.
Happy Friday.
So what was the happy Friday to you too, brother? What was the sentiment around Oregon?
Oh, well, we were talking about jobs in general, cannabis jobs in general. Sure. And ultimately, a couple statistics that were thrown out were California being the nation's leading cannabis employer with 5.1 billion in total cannabis sales in 2021, supporting 83,607 jobs, which is pretty big. But then Oregon's mentioned with 1.1 $1 billion in cannabis products in 2021 with just about 20,000 jobs. So that's, looking pretty good. We were just talking about Oregon as a contributor to the job market in cannabis, legal cannabis.
Totally. Yeah, there's a lot of farms up here, and obviously, folks are looking at work and things and how they work in a different way after the last couple of years. So I know of several farms that even like employing folks on a part-time opportunity, I think it's brought more people to the industry overall.
Oh yeah. No, and it's gonna just keep going. Really, what did we just cross? State number 39 with medical. That's not anything that was in our notes or anything like that, but I think we just crossed state 39 with medical, and we've got 7 more with something in the bills coming up for this 2022 election. So there's a lot of movement happening, and the job market is going to keep growing. This is something that we're going to just see how recession proof cannabis is as a recreational use tool, as well as what people turn to on the medicinal side continuously, right? And much like they say, there's certain vices and there's certain recreational use type things that are recession proof. I do believe cannabis is going to prove to be one of those things that, hey, we're pretty pandemic proof. I think we're gonna be hitting the tough times, head on, and that cannabis will survive most things, just because essentially it's something that helps cope and leaves less of a mark when in regards to alcohol or other recreational type drugs. So yeah, jobs. And speaking of that, I know your company's growing like crazy. The first time we spoke on careers in cannabis, that's how we met, was to talk about jobs, right? And can't remember. I think you had like 56 employees at that point. We were keying in on the fact you were employee number 6, and you guys had 56 people up there in Penn.
That's crazy to even think about. We were going into 2021. We had 127 employees, and we currently have about 675. So there was obviously 2 acquisitions that happened in there that represent about 300 of them. But, we're consistently hiring, always hiring engineering talent, always hiring folks on the CS and support side. I mean, I pridefully say that we have a great platform, but, the people that make up an org are what makes everything, right? It's how you support things. In cannabis especially, there's a lot of fires to put out on a daily basis. And so if we can help solve a lot of those in a couple different ways, we're super stoked on it. And then really giving people an opportunity to break into cannabis from a universal standpoint, right? In cannabis, we talk about all the time, is so market specific. I loosely, and there are folks that are far more versed than myself, but you get experience with all 39 of those states and Canada in terms of how cannabis is functioning from a business lens. So the intellectual property that you gain there in itself and understanding what's happening with the industry is massive, which is awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Without holding you to anything or whatnot, you have any predictions for where we are 5 years from now in that jobs report, with where it could be legalization wise here in the United States?
In terms of just overall, in terms of cannabis?
Yeah, you think we double that number?
Yeah.
You think we're gonna?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In terms of are you talking Dutchie specifically or just in general?
Oh, no. I apologize.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
cannabis jobs.
Cannabis, yeah.
In general.
Totally. I think the jobs are going to change. I think ancillary support businesses of the industry are going to continue to pop up. For example, we never touched the plant. We are an ancillary support business of the cannabis industry, in that we're a technology provider. Same thing, marketing companies, lead gen companies. There's really cool, as cannabis has a lot of moving parts in terms of operational efficiencies, there will always be cool companies and startups and groups that are helping solve problems because there's a lot of problems to solve. So I think that, just as many entrepreneurial opportunities as you look at from just actual having a job, right? What's having a job anymore? You got to have a career. It's something that you care about. I've had enough jobs, man. I came to cannabis because I was tired of having jobs. I have something that I care about. It's a passion now. And so I think that's really the common denominator, right? Think about professional sports, you think about cannabis, they're very similar in the fact that the common denominator of the person that works in that space is insanely passionate about that business, right? Or in that industry. Like people are super passionate about professional sports, very passionate about cannabis. So I think that'll nothing but continue.
Yep. Yeah.
Totally.
No, absolutely. And yeah, I think realistically, when we see these markets unfurl and kind of go the route of medical to recreational and that kind of thing, I think we've just begun. And like you said, a lot of those jobs are going to become ancillary and support tools and that kind of stuff to the industry. But yeah, I see us at 1 million plus in 5 years easily in this industry and supporting.
Totally, yeah. If you're including the ancillary, for sure.
Yeah.
Because again, it's the support businesses of cannabis that really continue to drive it forward, for sure.
Right. Well, and as opposed to how we talk about drug tests here, essentially the only reason someone gets drug tested here is if I think they're not smoking cannabis. As long, but all joking aside, the flip side of this cannabis job thing is what we're talking about here with the Wells Fargo and the trucking aspect of it, and the way that testing doesn't allow for people who have probably rightfully so tested jobs when they're operating heavy machinery and where they're out in the public and they're around people that they can run over and that kind of stuff is really, anecdotally, a lot of people will tell you that, hey, I drive better on cannabis. I drive more relaxed. I drive a little more mellow. It's not for everybody, and realistically, there's people who do drive erratic and do get kind of anxious and or paranoid while they're driving and that kind of stuff. And really, there's not enough studies there. And one of the things within legalization we've talked about is this need to know how to test for and to kind of put impaired driving in a place when it comes down to cannabis. And one of the things we're talking about here is trucking. We're talking about supply chain over those last little bit, pandemic, and why isn't toilet paper on the shelf? Why isn't there water on the shelf? Why isn't stuff coming in from China the way it should? And Wells Fargo says it's because 72,000 truckers had been removed from the road since January 2020 for positive THC tests, of which really at this juncture, how many of those people do we know were driving high, right?
So that's where you find a lot of like the inconsistencies there is, there probably hasn't been a day since, I won't name the age that I was, but since I started consuming cannabis on a regular basis that I would ever pass a drug test for not having THC.
Right.
And so like that's, they are working on some things in terms of like being able to like, because you shouldn't drive impaired or do anything impaired, operating heavy machinery, don't get me wrong, right? Without a doubt, there is obvious disadvantages and dangers of doing it such. When I think about like the unfairness of the situation of being, deemed like you can get a DUI. I mean, just as similar as you get like drinking, obviously you get a DUI. With cannabis has the same impact on your criminal record, has the same impact on your ability to go drive. And that's just not a fair assessment. Folks could have been consuming cannabis the night before, but are not impaired at all.
Right.
It really stems from like how we're looking at that, right? Are we comparing apples to oranges, or are we actually looking at, the bigger picture and what it means to like actually like understand? Like now testing for employment, entirely different thing. That's a company's prerogative, right? But at the end of the day, like you can't have your cake and eat it.
What do you want people to work for you or not? Right. I think that's why Amazon's kind of lowering the gates and Apple kind of did. And, and did you see on a couple stories back, they were talking about brain scanners, like an actual a brain scan to tell if you're actively high. It's like,
I would love to know what that brain scanner kicked back on me in terms of results. Just gonna say does not read, no response, no signal available.
I wonder how much scar tissue it would find.
Yeah, dude. I just, I guess these are very, in a very serious point though, like these are very serious things that we're making decisions on with very little information or ability to like make those decisions in a meaningful way. So that's where I get kind of worried about things. Ideally it's gonna continue to improve with like public information being better and everything else like that, but it does concern me from that lens.
Well, back when we started this, I don't know if we actually spoke about it or not, but we definitely covered it in our morning buzz and that kind of thing. Is back when they were announcing that the DEA was able to test from different dispensaries rather than just getting it from Ole Miss, and the different sourcing aspects, and them starting to run tests on driving impairment and that kind of thing, and really getting a different budget. So the DEA, I know, is kind of actively going after driver impairment. They're trying to figure these things out. But I mean, hey, we're in the age of technology, right? And a lot of things are being fast forwarded. But the last 20 years is these government agencies have been using all of their efforts to figure out how bad the plant is. So I figure they might have had a foot forward on that already, but they don't. So we're going to have to wait, like you said, 5 years or so for something to be effectively tested as to where they can say, hey, you know what, this guy's stoned right now, and not yesterday because he's a little bit chubbier and holds it differently.
I honestly would rather that we contract private companies to do the study versus government agencies. Because I don't know if it's too soon, but it's not like when information hasn't been withheld before. If anybody's been reading the news lately, right? So, too soon? I don't know. But point being is like, if we're gonna give it a fair shot, give it a fair shot. Otherwise, might as well not show up.
Right. Absolutely. And so when it comes down to it, is we're looking at the supply shortage, and really, is it a supply shortage, or are we shorting ourselves of people that are willing to work in an environment where it's less and less popular to actually, sign into work and go to work and put in these hours? I mean, truckers, granted, a lot of them can own their own rigs and can work and under somebody else's license, and there's lots of different ways to drive as a trucker. But really, if you can't use cannabis while it's legal for the rest of the world, just for recreational, not even while you're driving, it's seemingly gonna put at least 72,000 people out of a job, which these DOTs, the Series A drivers here in California, it's no joke right now. I don't know. It's a very low ticket count when you get that driver's license revoked. Obviously, you test dirty. There's 72,000 people who tested dirty for cannabis and had their license revoked, right?
I mean, people need to look deeper to understand, though. It's not the company's decision. It's the idea that they're receiving usually federal grants or federal money to support their businesses. It's like the DOT. And because they would take that federal money, very similar like healthcare, right? There's a very specific set of rules that come along with that. Not to say that there aren't like privately funded hospitals and stuff where, RNs and folks don't have to take drug tests, because I think they always, and that's been a common practice in medicine for a long time. But when you think about like the bigger overarching issue here is the idea of the inconsistencies between federal and state policy, which is the entire genesis of these conversations. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. Well, and then the next point on that is truckers were denoted as 72,000, but another hard-hit industry was U.S. Postal Service, which is, again, the U.S. Postal Service. The mail, everyone knows it's a federal offense if you mess with it. So obviously it's federally governed. So again, in 37 of these states where it's legal to consume in one fashion or another, how does this double standard live when essentially they're limiting themselves and even their government workers, right? So this is something that's going to have to be answered here quickly. And I get it. Heavy machinery. We're talking about this, and I'm not advocating, to be out there and driving under the influence of anything. And there's no knowing your limits. There's just, hey, be wary of other people. Keep other people safe, right? But when it comes down to this, is why should someone lose their job if they can't prove they were driving under the influence at all, especially if someone takes care not to, right? And that's it. We're gonna have to come up with something for that quick. And I don't know if it's in the form of the testing that they're trying to do, of which has been elusive and inconclusive for quite some time because the saliva doesn't do it and the urinalysis doesn't do it, or if they come up with something and adopt a policy as long as they don't get caught. It's kind of like getting pulled over here in California. Just because they smell cannabis in the car doesn't mean they have a right to search it. If they smell burning cannabis in the car, then they have the right to give you a field sobriety test and do all that kind of stuff and whatnot. But essentially,
it's still, I mean, to me though, that's still so subjective. Oh, I thought I smelled. I mean, what is it? So we're depending on folks to tell the entire truth to be able to distinguish between cannabis, vaped cannabis, burning cannabis. I mean, get out of here. Like, let's be serious. But, hey, I guess it is a step in the right direction. But I think it's more in the step. I think we talked about this prior, right? And again, there really is no way to not regulate because, like, for example, if you smell alcohol in the car, you're going to search the car, right? Same sort of thing. If someone's swerving all over the road, you're going to give them a sobriety test. When you think about like what it is with cannabis, and I talked about this last week, there are things that are done that are going to make an impact. There are things that are done as like here's a headline, so you leave me alone for the next 6 months. Right. I feel like that's a very subjective thing that was a press release, policy passed based on press release and being a press release and like how advantageous it was. So, I mean, hey, I guess we'll take it, right? But it doesn't really clear anything up. It doesn't keep any more people out of. I guarantee you that the distinction between somebody getting marched in a Wu-Tang hoodie and whether or not they smell burning cannabis or actual cannabis, when they are look, talk, and act like I do, they're like, cool, the guy smokes weed, charged, guilty. It is what it is.
Right.
I don't see how that changed anything, to be honest with you.
No. I like the comment over there by Donkey Limit. Next, we'll have strip searches for our RSO patches.
Right.
I'll certainly be looking for Mary Medicinals on the back of your neck.
Totally.
But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that unravels and how really this employment as a driver works out for people, because the herd is thinning when it comes down to that, and more states make it legal every day. So less and less people are going to be choosing to have a job that entails that they don't, use cannabis recreationally, especially when they know it's a better recreational tool than most of the other things out there for you.
Totally.
So hey, Midwest strikes again. Kentucky's out there saying some stuff, and I don't know if you had a chance to over it. I know they were first out there with some of the hemp laws and doing some big things out there with that, and ultimately they have some pretty good growing conditions as a supply chain contributor for here in the U.S. But new cannabis legalization bill titled "Let's Grow," which stands for Legalize, Expunge, Treat, and Tax, or Senate Bill 186 is in the Senate, and the House Bill 21 has been filed. So what does that mean to Kentucky? I know you're pretty well affiliated out there with those states and not affiliated, but pretty well knowledgeable about what's going on in those neck of the woods. What do you think about that? What's going on out in Kentucky?
So honestly, I'm actually hearing about this now. It's been a bit of a crazy week, so I've been catching up on it, but it sounds like that's being pushed out as like an adult use policy out of the gates, right?
Yep.
Totally.
I can go over the bill's principal components: would legalize sales, expunge crimes, provide treatment through medical use, and then tax adult use sales.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I think that medical is usually such an easier thing to get off the ground first. Like, for example, South Dakota did the same thing, and they keep pushing back the launch date of the cannabis program. And traditionally, it's been the case where states will set up a medical program to build the rails to be successful with adult use. So that's not just from like get the dispensaries open and get their feet underneath them, because that's obviously an important piece of it. The taxation structure, the regulatory structure, understanding what works, what doesn't, like the volumes of folks and the amount, like you kind of have to walk, crawl, run there, in my opinion. Because what happens is when you start talking about adult use and everything like that, it seems, at least in my experience, to drag the process out if you don't go from a medical with a fast follow on adult use. But it's exciting. I mean, it's obviously very progressive. It's definitely something you wouldn't see out of a state in the South, which is what Kentucky is, by the way. I would say Midwest stops at like Illinois and Missouri, and then everything east of that, Tennessee might have a shot, but everything there is like South for sure.
South. Okay.
Totally. And I only say that because I'm a Kansas Cityan, and if you're from California, you'd be like, oh yeah, we're not neighbors with Arizona. There's obviously Nevada between the two of us. It's not, whatever.
Right.
The point being, the expunging crimes is the big part that I hope to see happen. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that we can make improvements on based on the idea that the biggest initiative, which is getting people out of prison, happens first. Because then everything else follows after that. Yes, the business will be successful. I mean, look, if you haven't realized that people are always buying more legal cannabis tomorrow and they bought it today, and from now until the end of the time, you're just watching a different movie. So the success of the industry is not necessarily going to be what's in question. It's our ability to right some of the wrongs that have already occurred and make ourselves, not be so hypocritical on how we're positioning cannabis in the United States specifically as it relates to that. And I think the more we keep moving in that direction, the better it is, for sure.
Well, yeah, no, an expungement, it allows people who were part of the process that got taught. I have a partner who, had a felony grow on his record, and he was able to get it expunged and participate in licensing and do that kind of stuff. So it allows people who aren't locked up for it currently to participate in what's going on. But, we got to take those steps further and get the people who are locked up for it still, not living life out as well. And expungement really doesn't take care of that, because expungement's more about people who have been charged and mostly served their time. And so, yeah, no, but it's a great step forward because it allows people who participated in this effort and driving cannabis forward and getting caught up in the fray and doing it in a light that wasn't provided for, let's call it, by the rules. I mean, much like California, right? They came up and said, medically speaking, here's what you can do. And if there's rules, there's ways to bend them, to ambiguously bend them, and use them to your advantage. And really that creates the markets of which we've been experiencing. So
totally. I'm very curious to see some of the finer points of that. And I'm going to read through the legislation now following the podcast, but the ability to share an ounce between adults over what period of time, right? Is that an ounce per day you can share between adults? Is that an ounce per month, an ounce per week? And in which case, how is that tracked, right? How are you going to document that I shared my ounce with Jared today and I can't share it again with him? And so is there going to be a state approved tracking system for that? Because if they're, I don't know, I'm just very curious. The ideas are great in intention most of the time, but
yeah, no, you have to look into it, because it says would make it legal to have 1 ounce of cannabis in public and up to 12 ounces in a private place. And it also says that it'd be, like you said, lawful to share up to 1 ounce, but people could legally permit, possess, and consume, also grow up to 10 mature cannabis plants at home. So it provides for legal cannabis. It's got to provide at least for you to, I don't know, that's right there. That's saying if you grow over 12 ounces on those 10 plants, you might be in jeopardy if you just read the broad strokes of it. So yeah, like you said, totally. I want to get into the finite details here. But yeah, at least it's a step forward, and if they can get it through, start with the expungement and letting people, start outliving their cannabis past, right? They're also atrocious crimes against humanity.
Yep, totally.
But yeah, so yeah, that was about it. All we had on for the agenda on this one is a couple things moving federally, and hey, that's going to affect us all for a while here until they start to figure that out. And really, like you said, it holds the biggest consequence for people who are under federal employ, but people who are much more near and dear to our cause, which is the people who are still locked up for this, federally speaking, because there's still no such thing as medical cannabis as a defense. There's no such thing as, hey, it's going to be legal. And that's what's got to change. That's what we're here to talk about and bring light to on most of these issues.
Totally.
But yeah, so I'm excited. Next week, you want to tell them what's coming? Who's coming? It's next week, right?
I don't know if it's not next week. I think we're pushing that one out a little further, actually.
Oh, we are. 3,
yeah,
4?
I think that was I think it was not 3. Maybe it was. I don't know. I'll have to look, dude. Obviously,
we pushed it from this week to next. But yeah, we'll leave it. We'll leave it as a surprise. Then everyone's gonna have to hang on bated breath.
Sure.
don't turn blue over it. But yeah, we're gonna have a guest on next week. I'm hell or high water now that I said that. So we'll confirm
Totally.
it is who I thought it was, and then we'll get back to everybody on it. But yeah, hey, thanks for joining us on another Friday. Thanks for everybody in the comments. And John, thanks for figuring out your technical difficulties. I know, once we get into the
Always
thick of
fun.
things, it's sweaty palms until we get the stuff going. But
Totally,
yeah,
man.
thanks for joining in.
You bet, brother. It's
Right
great
on.
connecting, man. Look forward to seeing everybody next Friday.
Everyone have a great weekend.